but it's not a felony. It's an act of love.
Can Jeb Bush sell that in Iowa, in South Carolina?
It's difficult, John. I think, he's been trying to sort of make this case, walk it forward ever since he left office, and really obviously had a lot of support from Hispanic voters in Florida, and that was part of his broad appeal. That's what a lot of people like about him still.
Can Republicans step into that, the dissatisfaction, the complaints of the Latino community, and try to turn that?
Well, there certainly is an opening here. I mean, over the last couple of years, the narrative has really been that Democrats have a lock on the Hispanic vote because of some of the things that Republicans have said and voted for on immigration reform. But there's a lot of anger in the Hispanic community over deportation.
All right, folks, that was, of course, CNN, John King, and they were talking about the immigration issue and the remarks made by Jeb Bush. Joining us now is a man who has a great column about all this, and you watch him on the Fox News channel, where he is contributor and chief political correspondent at the Washington Examiner, Byron York. Good to speak to you, Byron.
Hi, Steve. Good to be here.
Well, thank you very much. Okay, so let's talk about this. I mean, your column, brilliantly written, and better than I could ever put it down in words or say it, but it's common sense. I mean, some of us have been saying this for a long time. You and I have talked about this, but you reinforce it here, and the headline almost says it all, which is that a study finds more immigrants equals more Democrats and more losses for Republicans. What is it about that Republicans, including Jeb Bush, do not understand?
You know, I don't know. Basically, this is a study that comes out from the Center for Immigration Studies, which is a group that opposes Gang of Eight style reform. And they did a few things, like they looked at the voting patterns of naturalized immigrants who've come here in the last 30 years. That's people who are here, came here legally, are now U.S. citizens and do vote. And they self-identify as Democrats overwhelmingly, more than 2 to 1. They call themselves Democrats over Republicans. And there's no reason to think that the maybe 11 or 12 million who are now here illegally probably will be made legal at some time in the future. No reason to think that they will vote in different ways.
Right, and we've talked a lot about on this show, and others have talked about, that the Hispanic community is there for the taking, because they do have conservative values when it comes to family, when it comes to education, when it comes to concern about family well-being and jobs and all that kind of stuff. But a lot of these people who would become legal and would be coming over, they're poor, and once they self-identify for whatever reason, rightly or wrongly, if you will, as Democrats, it's as we could see, it's not easy to switch a person over and say, oh no, you made a mistake here, look at us, because the Republicans have been unable to do that with the African American community and with the Hispanic community.
Right, and also Hispanic immigrants, and first of all, we're talking about all immigrants, but a large number are Hispanic, specifically from Mexico, do often settle in large places that are already democratic. They're essentially socialized into American politics in democratic environments, and this is just what happens. And I think it's important to stress here, I don't see any scenario under anybody's plan that would result in any lessening of the number of people who are coming to the United States legally, about 1 million a year. It's not going to go down. The question is whether to increase that number, as the Gang of Eight plan passed by the Senate last year would do. And one of the things I'm saying here is that, look, I don't doubt that Democrats strongly believe in the policy they're espousing, but the policy they're espousing just happens to politically benefit them. And should Republicans make that same sort of partisan political calculation and not want to increase the number of incoming immigrants who will likely become Democrats?
Yeah, it just, it doesn't make sense on so many levels, and when you talk about the fact that people don't have jobs now, and you're going to get a flood of people coming in, taking low-paying jobs. They want high-skilled people coming in to take the high-skilled jobs that they say we don't have the skills for now. I mean, there are no jobs now. There'll be less jobs then. None of it makes any sense, and I guess we should be thankful, those of us who believe as we do, that so far nothing has gotten accomplished. Let me ask you about the Jeb Bush remark. We had former G.W. Bush advisor Ron Christie on, and he said, I love Jeb Bush, but he torpedoed any chance he might have had with that statement. I mean, to me, Byron, if that's what you believe, that it's an act of love, and it's not, I know it's not a felony, and it's an act of love, well, then maybe the argument for people who rob banks or legitimately rob a grocery store because their kids are hungry or they're hungry, maybe we should not make that not a felony anymore and not put them in jail. I mean, where do you stop this act of love stuff?
Well, Jeb Bush certainly did not help himself with this remark. And by the way, it was part of kind of a long and somewhat meandering answer to questions that he gave in this interview with Fox News' Shannon Bream. I thought he really didn't look like somebody who was kind of in shape to run for president. I don't mean physically, but I mean in the way of being sharp and on your game. But anyway, he didn't really make any friends. But you have to remember, the Republican Party is very divided on this question of immigration reform. I would say the Republican base is strongly against it, but the Republican donor class, the kind of people that Jeb Bush would be appealing to as he starts up a race, if he does so, they're very much in favor of it. So the Republican Party is divided. Just look at the vote that was in the Senate. I'm doing this off the top of my head. I believe Democrats were unanimous for it, and I believe 14 Republicans voted for it, and the rest, about 30 Republicans, voted against it. So Republicans are in the Senate were 2-1 against immigration reform, but still a third of their conference was in favor of it. So the Republican Party is never going to speak in as united a voice on this issue as Democrats are. Yeah, no, I know when you talk about not looking presidential or not seeming prepared, Hillary, when she was asked, and this is another great piece you wrote at WashingtonExaminer.com. I hope they're not coming for you. I know they're not coming. I'm sorry. This is kind of the state song of the District of Columbia. No, that's okay. That's okay. Believe me, that's okay. By the way, the president, as we speak, is starting a news conference. Supposedly, he's going to make remarks on how great Obamacare is doing, and then he's going to take questions. But you mentioned not being cohesive enough in his answer on immigration, not looking presidential in that answer. Hillary, when she was asked about her greatest accomplishment at state, had really no answer. And I said at the time that she didn't look presidential, and it was one of our guests who I keep slipping my mind who the heck said it, Judge Napolitano maybe, who said she had a Ted Kennedy moment when he was asked why he was running for president when he was running against Carter in the primaries, and he couldn't come up with an answer. Anyway, your piece says that because she's short on accomplishments, Hillary's now turning to Barack Obama and Bill Clinton to sell her presidency. I mean, a fair media would destroy her, Byron, because look at the disastrous tenure as Secretary of State. But is she going to swim by all that? Well, you're absolutely right. You talk about a meandering and unfocused answer. And these were softball questions. Yeah, Thomas Friedman asked her. Thomas Friedman. Exactly. She was at a conference, a women's conference in New York. Thomas Friedman, New York Times columnist, asking questions. He was asking questions like, what has your daughter Chelsea taught you? What have you learned from her? So, real softball questions, and all he asked is, what are you most proud of looking back on your 4 years as Secretary of State? And the basic answer is she didn't have anything that she named. But I think what was more important in that answer is that she discussed her time as Secretary of State, but also public service in general, as a relay race. And this is an image you hear some from Barack Obama, and I think she's going to adopt it, and it's going to kind of be the key to her campaign, which is that she will continue the great work that has been done by her Democratic predecessors. Her husband picked up the baton, he ran with it, led America to a period of great prosperity. Right. George W. Bush dropped. We only have 30 seconds, Byron. But no, I think that's a brilliant point. I remember she said she views it as a relay race and the baton and the whole thing. And I think you're right. That's her way of making her case for herself without emphasizing her own accomplishments or lack of them. It's going to be interesting. Thank you for sharing with us, Byron York, Chief Political Correspondent for the Washington Examiner and Fox News analyst. Thank you, sir. Great to be with you, Steve. Thank you, Byron. Always great to talk to you. Okay, folks, we're coming back with Gimme 5 on the Steve Malzberg Show.
We don't just talk about the news, we talk to those making news. This is the Steve Malzberg Show.